I'll still go through all the parts. Acknowledgement country. Council acknowledges the traditional custodians of the land where we work and live. Council celebrates the diversity of Aboriginal peoples and their ongoing cultures and connections to the land and waters of the New South Wales Central Tablelands. Lisa, could you please start the recording of the meeting?
Yes.
Thank you. Members advise that proceedings of this meeting, other than any other confidential matters, will be recorded. Do we have any apologies, councillors? Can I have a mover and a seconder?
Sorry, Councillor Ring is an apology.
Yes. Can I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Fry, will you? And Bruce, Councillor Reynolds, second. All four?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you, councillors. No public question time. Confirmation of minutes of ordinary meeting of Upper Macquarie County Council held on the 19th of June 2020. Can I have a mover and a seconder?
I'll move that.
Councillor Leslie. Councillor McKibben, thank you. All four? Against? Carried. Disclosure of interest. Can I have a move and a seconder? Councillor Capel, you move that? Yep. Who's Councillor Reynolds second? Is there any declarations of interest, Mr. General Manager?
None received, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. All four?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. No presentation. County Chairman's report. Confidential item.
There are two reports, actually, Mr. Chairman.
Sorry.
You did a report and a supplementary report.
Yep.
So they'll both be dealt with later in the meeting.
I'll move that they be deferred to later in the meeting.
Yes, I'll second it.
So, okay, suspension of the standing orders to move out. All four?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Okay. This is so different doing it this way. Okay, councillors. Item 1, certificate, unaudited general purpose financial statements. Can I have a mover and a seconder?
Yes.
Is that Bruce? So, Councillor McKibben, seconder.
Councillor Kingham.
Councillor King, sorry, thank you. Any questions, councillors?
Yes.
Yep, Councillor McKibben. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think in the reports, in these financial accounts, the column on the left says original budget 2019. I think that should be original budget 2020. Is that correct, Mr. General Manager? Because that was the budget for 2020, and we're then talking about the actuals for 2020 and comparing it to the 2019 actuals.
That's correct, Mr. Chairman. It would be 2019-20, the way it's written, 2020.
So it should be 20.
Yes.
I have a couple more comments.
Yes.
Why are the user charges and fees that we actually receive in the income statement on page 6 so different from the cash flow statement, which is several pages later, which come in at 249. I would have thought in this respect that the income and the cash flow in from these should be roughly the same.
Mr. General Manager.
And the same with grants and contributions. Under the actuals for 2020 of 993, when you look at the cash flow statement and the notes at 3A, it says 989. I can't understand the discrepancy from the cash flow to the income in this respect to these particular items.
Okay, Mr. General Manager, could you answer that, please?
Mr. Chairman, I'll have to flick between pages, but if I can start by saying that the user fees and charges are the category of external revenue sources, nothing to do with the constituent councils or DPI. So can you then refer me to the set? That's the 598 that was referred to as the original budget. Mr. Chairman, what was the next page you went to?
So, sorry, so the actual for 2020 was 320 on the same line of page, I think it's 8. Oh, God, I'm just doing it. And I didn't print, I did have printed the next page out because I'm looking at screens as well at the moment. So page 8 of the financial accounts, if you go across, it says original budget 2025, 98, actual 2023, 20. But then if you go several pages later and you look at the note 3A to the financial accounts, it says the actual cash received was 249. I'm wondering why there's a discrepancy there of about 70,000. We haven't received that cash, I'm assuming.
Mr. Chairman, I understand the question, but I don't think I can resolve it at this moment on the run trying to flick around on my computer pages.
Sorry, and it is a complex. I'm sorry, I meant to send an email, but I was landmarking up until about 3/4 of an hour ago, so I didn't have time to send an email. And the same, it's only a smaller discrepancy in relation to the grants and contributions. On page 8, the actual's 993. Then you look at the accounts and note 3A and the cash flow statement, and it seems to refer to 989. It's only a $4,000 difference, so not a major one, whereas the other one is quite substantial.
Mr. Chairman, in relation to that last point, there is a small amount of money that we received as a grant from DPI, which isn't actually recorded as income for this year because it's held in trust for the Mexican feathergrass over the next few years. It's that small amount to go and do further inspections. So
right.
It's
okay, well, let me explain that one. That may be the 4,000.
Yes.
So if I could step in there, Mr. GM, can we have maybe a note to, if we have something like that, to clarify any in future financial reports, that if there's discrepancies stand out there because of things like that, could we have notes in there, just a simple line item?
We can, and I'll get back to that question and answer it later on, but I couldn't get to it now.
Yep. No, appreciate that.
I mean, it purely may be the timing in the money coming in. I understand that because the cash flow doesn't always reflect the income, but I just thought in relation to user charges and fees that it's strange that there's a $70,000 issue. The next one is I understand that the total employee leave entitlements, I think it's page 19, that we're sort of carrying forward on the books is 150,000. And is the general manager satisfied that's a sufficient provision for accrued annual leave?
Mr. Chairman, the review of our actual internal reserves is due to be, as soon as this statement is finalised, I need to review that and come back to the council, and I'll certainly specifically address that question then. But in general terms, I am, because we've traditionally put aside the full value of all of the leave that we're due to pay. But obviously we don't expect to pay out all of our long service leave in the immediate short term or the next 12 months. So we don't necessarily need to have the total amount there. But the intention is once the accounts are finalised, I'll do a report to council checking on where we are in relation to all of our reserves and whether we should be transferring further cash into it.
And my question, Mr. Chairman, I suppose relates something in that we paid out 76,000 this year in relation to annual leave. So then my question is, as we've only accrued 150,000, is that a sufficient provision for the future? That's where it comes from.
Mr. Chairman, I only heard half of that question, but
It was a statement, I think, sorry, through you, Mr. Chairman. It was basically saying this year we expended, 2019-20, we expended 76,000 on annual leave. And we have a provision going forward of 150,000. I'm just querying whether that's enough, and I'm glad that we're having a review of that after these financial statements to ensure those provisions are adequate. That's,
You'll
I
have
think,
to-
all I have on the accounts, Mr. Chairman.
Any
It's not
other?
Are
Sorry?
you expecting, sorry, Stephen Leslie, are you expecting to actually spend 150,000 this year, or that's just putting aside in case?
Mr. Chairman, the 150,000 is the actual entitlement if everybody took all of their leave, including sick leave, long service leave and everything now.
Well, that's what I thought. Therefore, I mean, 150 is fine, but it's clearly more than sufficient.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
No worries. Thank you, Councillor Leslie. And Mr. Chairman, I guess that potentially if we could send some information out to councillors, or when we have our working party, potentially if it could be a chance to have a 10 or 20-minute discussion on that at the same time, if we have got time at that meeting.
Sorry, Ian, Councillor Reynolds has his hand up.
Councillor Reynolds, thank you. No, Councillor Reynolds, did you want us? Is that still a hangover from?
He can't.
No,
We can't hear him.
we can't hear him.
We've lost sound for you.
Councillor Reynolds? It's not crossed off, is it? So he should be right.
Why don't you ask him to use the phone? There was a phone-in number.
He's now dropped off.
Yeah, he's gone now. He might be going to join back up again in a minute. Can we give him a minute? Is that allowed? Here he comes.
Yes.
Here he comes. Here he's trying to join back in now. Sorry.
That's all right.
Here he comes. Yep.
Yes, Councillor Reynolds.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you
Yes.
now. You've
So I
got the
was
floor.
talking.
You've got the floor.
Thank you. Sorry, I was just going to suggest, with regard to leave, in another organisation that I chair the board of, and we've got probably about 3 times the staff that we've got here with Upper Macquarie, the board actually gets the leave entitlements, whether it's as a confidential document, as in it may be in confidential so that the public can't see, but as in we get them at every board meeting, but maybe every 6 months that you actually see, so that if you see there's a problem emerging with a large amount of leave. So whether that's possible from the general manager, that a 6-monthly report or something is brought forward, whether that's confidential or not, as in it's up to the general manager. But that's just a suggestion, wasn't what I was going to talk about. With regard to page 18, I just was going to suggest a couple of, I think it's 18, 15, a couple of suggested slight amendments in section D on page 18. And I suspect this template's been taken out of council, as in, so, you know, a council template, but to change the mayoral fees to the chair's fees,
Yeah.
change the councillor's fees to the members' fees, and again, the next one down, members' expenses, given that we've got new titles these days.
Mr. Chairman, that is the standard format that we've been using, and I agree those things need to be amended in the final version. And you'll note, for example, on the certificate to be signed, we've already adjusted that to be member, councillor and chairperson. So it's absolutely correct, Councillor Reynolds, we need to update those points in the final version.
I must admit, Mr. Chairman, I saw them and I thought they were probably a pro forma that needed to be used for accounting purposes, the state government accounting purposes. But I agree with Councillor Reynolds. It'd be far better to change them if we could.
Yeah.
And one other quick question.
Yes,
on
sure.
page 19, it says carryover works, $350,000. I'm just wondering, that's just below the employees' leave entitlement that Member McKibben was just talking about. What are these carryover works of $350,000?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, the auditors have this very strange process of what they categorise all of their funds for. At this moment, I can say I'm not sure what the $350,000 is either, because we don't have that amount of actual work. So that they've actually been through this very quickly to make sure that it was compliant. But that's a matter that I'm also trying to get onto at the minute. It's just which category it goes into. but it's obviously excessive. We don't have $350,000 worth of carryover work.
So, Mr. GM, you have any idea at all what it could be for something you haven't seen in another category?
It is, I don't off the top of my head. The thing is that we've got about $50,000 worth still. And of course, you all know that one of them is that 40,000 that we have for the book, which, by the way, is progressing now. And then there's a few odd little bits like the 4,000 I mentioned before to do with DPI and the Mexican feathergrass. And there's always one or two little odd bits that technically hanging around. So I think that's another item. I can get back to council members very shortly, like some of Councillor McKibben's questions, just to let you know why they are what they are.
Well, it's worth noting that last year was only 50,000.
That's right, exactly. Yeah.
Mm.
The problem is we only had these finalised the day the agenda went out, so I didn't have quite as much time as I would have liked to go right through it. But it all adds up that way, even if some of the elements are in the wrong place.
So, Mr. GM, if you, in the early questions from Member Councillor McKibben and Member Councillor Reynolds, if you can give responses both to the member councillors ASAP, that would be greatly appreciated. Are all the councillors happy with that?
Yes.
Yeah, I think the answers should be circulated to all members, not just the ones who've asked them.
No, that's what it will be.
I understand that's the case.
Yep.
No worries. Any other questions, councillors? Any hands? No. Okay, councillor, we've got moving second. All four? Aye. Against, carried. Thank you. Thank you for commentary. Councillors, item 3, pecuniary interest returns for 2020. Can I have a mover and a seconder?
Sorry, have we missed statement of investments?
Oh, sorry.
Item 2?
I've realised your 2 fingers. Sorry, item 2, statement of investments. She's put 2 fingers up at me. Can I have a mover and a seconder, councillors? Councillor McKibben, Councillor Fry, you're right. Okay, any questions, councillors? No questions?
Just a comment that the interest rate of 0.35 is extraordinarily low, but that's what you get, is it?
Mr. GM?
Mr. Chairman, just the 0.35 is actually once you've taken it out of the longer term deposit and it's effectively on hold, on notice, which means it'll be withdrawn over the next, well, there's a date here in this case. You know, if you have a normal savings account, you get nothing. So it's terribly low. That's just what
it's just your working number. Yes. Working. Yeah. God, that's fine. I got that.
Yeah, that's just a working account. Yeah.
Councillor Reynolds, I think you had a question.
Yes.
Yes.
I just wanted to clarify Table 1 and Table 2. Table 2 does not collate with Table 1. Table 1 says $1,050,000 is the balance we've got. Table 2 says approximately 950,000, so that 100,000, which is correct?
Mr. Chairman, I am aware of that anomaly. My Excel was crashing during preparation. It's actually the Table 1 number, and the graph in the Table 2, the bar is simply missing. It should be 1,050,000. I've actually corrected on my own version.
Councillor Reynolds, are you comfortable with that?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted clarification which one of the 2 was correct.
I guess our issue this year is a bit of a time problem, so hopefully next year's statements we can be in a better position. Any other questions there, councillors? No? All 4?
Aye.
Again, carried.
Aye.
Back to Groundhog Day. Item 3, pecuniary interest returns for 2020. Another move and a seconder, please, councillors.
I'll move that.
Councillor Leslie, Councillor Fry. Yep, thank you. Any questions? Figured it wouldn't be.
We just, well, only that we don't have a meeting before the 30th of September, so you'll have to make your own way to get it in.
Mr. GM, I was talking to Lisa yesterday about this, so these will be forwarded to all our councillors on Monday or later today.
Mr. Chairman, I was just waiting for after this meeting because we'd sent so many papers out. So they'll be sent out forthwith, and we can make any arrangement necessary to get them back. So if you need us to send you an envelope, or you can email it, or get something done at your own council to send it off, whatever suits your technology.
We can cope.
Yeah.
I've already returned mine.
You have.
No worries, councillors. Okay, well, all for? Against, carried. Thank you.
Aye.
Item 4, County Council meeting schedule for 2020. Can I have a mover and seconder?
A comment. I'm happy to.
Councillor McKibben, Councillor Capel.
Councillor McKibben and Capel, okay, thank you for picking up that. Yeah, question, Councillor Leslie, I think you've dropped off.
Yes, the confidential workshop is on the 9th of the 10th. What about if we just made it with the 13th of the 11th? You never know what's going to happen. It's just, I'm just curious. I don't care either way.
Comments, anyone? We had,
McKibben?
yep.
Councillor McKibben? Is it okay, Mr. Chairman?
Correct me, Mr. Chairman, and just the General Manager. I thought we had some topics already for the workshop, and I was just wondering if some of those needed considering earlier than later. Maybe you could. I know we had a list of topics.
Mr. Chairman, we've got, I think it was 5 items that came out of discussions during the June meeting, and there might be 1 or 2 other issues that emerged during that time. I don't particularly have a view that they needed to be dealt with earlier, but maybe I'm missing something or haven't focused on that yet.
That's fine, Mr. Chairman. How about if we just give the General Manager the authority under the COVID problems to reschedule that if he so believes it would be valuable.
Councillors, a general consensus on that? Like, we had set the date, we were working towards that date. My personal opinion would be we continue to work to that date unless something changes, maybe as a suggestion in our General Manager, if he feels there's an issue, will contact us, he'll have discussions with me and we'll talk moving forward. Councillor Reynolds?
Sorry, it's just a bit further that. I'm just assuming that a confidential workshop on that matters would be valuable if we're actually in-house, that we were there, rather than trying to do it over a Zoom meeting, that's all.
Councillor McKibben would like to speak along with Councillor Reynolds.
Councillor Reynolds, I acknowledge there first. So, Councillor Reynolds.
Oh, actually, Councillor McKibben was waving his hands. I assume you can't see us, Councillor.
It's hard, sorry, checking and everything.
But I'll go first. I was just actually going to agree with what you just said, that as we've scheduled it for this date, and it is September, so it's still a couple of months away, that I'd like to see some of those issues that were raised at in the June meeting done by September and not left till...
It's actually October.
October, sorry, so it's even a month later, so it's 3 months, rather than leaving it till November, the 13th of November. So I'm in agreement, and if we have to do it on Zoom, then we have to do it on Zoom. But a month is not going to probably, if we're in lockdown, a month is probably not going to make much difference.
I withdraw with my objection.
Sorry, Councillor Leslie, sorry.
I withdraw my suggestion then.
No worries, but we will keep posted, see how it's going, and if there's any issues, I will organise for myself or the General Manager to contact you straight away. Now, Councillor McKibben, I am sorry.
No, that's fine. Look, I agree with the sentiments of yourself and Councillor Reynolds. The only other topic, and I'm not sure if the General Manager put on, it came up in relation when we were discussing performance recently, was about the hard to get to pathways, and we talked about maybe putting that as a topic for discussion on the list. So I just raise that now so we make sure it's on the list.
Mr. Chairman, it is definitely on the list and a very important component of it.
Thank you very much. Councillors, is there any other questions? If not, all for? Against, carried. God, this is very weird, isn't it? Okay, item 5, roadside weed control risk management system. Can I have a mover and a seconder? Is that Councillor McKibben already up, or his hand's already up there?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. Seconder?
Yes.
Councillor, any questions, councillors?
Councillor McKibben?
Councillor McKibben?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This was very interesting reading, actually, and when read in conjunction with the appendices, and with what's happened with the General Manager issuing a broad direction and everything, and how it tags in with the MOU for local councils and the roadside vegetation management plan, and how it actually can override all of that. I thought it was very interesting reading, and I think with all this in place, and I have read it several times, that I think it puts the Upper Macquarie in a very good position to be able to move ahead in all aspects, and that we get the appropriate sign-offs by the councils to allow us to do it, to do this. So I think overall, yes, it all seems to fit together. I was surprised that the roadside vegetation management plans could be overridden under the legislation, and us as the local control authority. I think it was section 179, and I think there was another section too that I think I saw somewhere, 388 or 389. But it all ties together, and it is some interesting reading. Both this and you need to read this in conjunction with the appendixes, and yeah, it all fits together. And I think it's a good job done in how we've researched it and how we've got all this to fit into place to put us in the position we are now with the council signing the appropriate documentation.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, it seems to me that the County Council showed great foresight in actually getting that MOU prepared in the last year, so that we're well ahead of the issues and the matters, the different responsibilities of the County Council and the local councils themselves are that much better understood. So I think that was a wonderful, wonderful foresight.
And issuing the general direction.
Yes, yes. So well done to the General Manager on that one.
Thank you. Councillor Reynolds?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of quick questions, hopefully quick, to the General Manager, or through you to the General Manager. With regard to the list and the priorities, are they going to fall how they fall on the list, or how are you actually going to prioritise? Because I know some years you run out of money or to do the roads that are there. Is there a priority within?
Mr. Chairman, I think if I can just quickly have a look at the list for 1 second, just to check a point.
You're all right.
I had it sitting here, now I can't find it. But Mr. Chairman, so at this point in time, the list of roads is just a list in no particular order. However, all of the roads that are on there are either roads that we'd identified as being high risk through our inspection program, which you understand. And then in some cases, we've added a few extra ones on which are the ones marked in yellow. And they were ones that have been raised by either local council members or our own volition. If there are any particular priorities that a member believes ought to be in there, then we'd be interested to hear that. But otherwise, we would typically go in terms of the roads that are a carryover from last year. So if if we did a big job last year, we've got some spots and gaps to fill up. That would be our highest priority for obvious reasons. And then we'd be moving on to the other roads at their highest risk level. So that would be our general logic, in which case that order could change. But Councillor McKibben's trying to speak.
Councillor McKibben?
Sorry, Mr. Chairman. Isn't this dealing with the next item, item 6? Because I thought the list of roads was actually in the next one, and the list of chemicals. And I had some comments on that, and I didn't think we were in that one yet.
Apologies, I might have skipped ahead, Mr. Chair. With running several screens at once, sometimes you can...
Yes, I'm having the same difficulty, Councillor Reynolds.
Well, you had me looking at the papers, so yep. So holding on 5, we control risk management system. We started down that path. Is there any other questions before I go to 6 and we continue on this discussion? Those hands. Okay. Okay. All 4 against for item 5? Yes? Okay. Item 6, can I have a move and a second for roadside weeds control program 2020-2021?
Councillor McKibben, Councillor Reynolds.
Councillor Reynolds. One of those gentlemen, Councillor McKibben or Reynolds? Councillor Reynolds, you were talking.
Okay, so thank you, Mr. Chair. Yep. So I think my question's been answered on the first question. So I'm just flipping back to between screens again to go. So within, and this may be more process, but to actually understand, as if a road's only got 2 or 3 weeds, how do we then actually engage the contractor so that the contractor gets paid fairly, but we don't overpay and say, okay, do we do so much per kilometre, or how is it actually calculated that we get the contractor to actually do that work on any particular road?
Mr. General Manager, or as our Senior Biosecurity Officer?
Well, I'll start with it, and depending on the detail you want to go to, but basically the contract is deliberately on an hourly basis. And what we've found from experience, and I mean including before my time, is that the quality of the work and the attention to detail is far superior if we do it that way. If we effectively pay them per kilometre or whatever, obviously there'll be kilometres with no weeds and kilometres that take a week to get through. And the idea of doing quotes, which is not impossible, but for the roads generally would be, in our view, fairly risky in terms of the value for money we get. So the Chief Biosecurity Officer might have a further comment in terms of whether that works well or not.
Chief Biosecurity Officer?
Yeah, for you, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Yeah, as the GM was saying, we've found best value for money and best quality of work when we work on the per hourly rate. Yeah, that's just through experience we've had and the results we've seen over time.
Mr. Chairman,
yes.
Mr. Chairman, can I just add another point, please?
Yes.
I also should point out that after last year's inspection, for example, or after each year's inspection, in due course, the biosecurity officers go through and do an inspection to identify, you know, the work that was done or not done and how successfully. In that process, they often identify small areas that have either been missed or didn't quite respond the way we would have liked them to. In those cases, one of the things we often do is keep those, let's just say, small, inefficient jobs aside. We don't give them to the contractors because you'd find them driving along 50 kilometres of road, and most of it would be looking and driving. And our officers keep track of those spots and then go out and do them in amongst their inspections and other work at a convenient time. And we've done some of that in Blaney, as Councillor Reynolds would be aware.
Mr. Chairman, can I comment?
Yes, Councillor Leslie.
What the General Manager just said there touches on what I was thinking about saying. You've got roads roadsides that would vary from very heavy infestation to light or zero. I was wondering if it's possible to sort of be working at it from both ends. At one point, you need to touch the very heavy ones, knowing that you'd have to come back over a number of occasions to get it right. But it's probably worthwhile also, looking at the very lightly affected roadsides and thinking, well, if a quick job now, and we can get that one solved for some time, but before it gets away, it's a lot easier to. I mean, anyone who does home gardening knows it's easier to do your own weeding in bits that haven't got much infestation than trying to sort of clean out your huge plots of weeds that have got huge amounts of bulbs and sort of tubers on it. So is that sort of the way that the county council would be considering this, from starting from opposite ends of the scale? If you follow what I'm getting at.
Mr. Chairman, I think it'd be fair to say there's another body of work to be done, and it relates to what we were talking about earlier, which is how do we find the worst of the private properties and what do we do with them, and how do we make sure we target the right places. The same issue arises in relation to roadsides in exactly the way Member Leslie has raised it. So what we're trying to do is actually tackle the worst roads of strategic significance first, so the ones that are genuinely considered those high-risk weed invasion pathways. But once we've started doing a roadside, if it was worth doing in the first place, then it's worth actually following through in the next year or whenever, even if there are only a couple of plants for the very reason described. So on the surface, I say we're looking for the really bad roads, the high-risk areas and all the rest of it, but that doesn't mean that once we've started a road, the fragments on roads that have grown back aren't still very important in order to complete the original job.
Councillor McKibben.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Look, I've got a few comments on this. So page 46, which on the screen, the document itself's not named. It starts the scheme of the biosecurity operations. This is in the appendices, page 46, under A, weed schedule. Now, we've listed quite a few there. I'm just wondering whether we should also include there just because it's a weed that will be sprayed, I would suggest, when in particular blackberry and St. John's wort and some of the others are sprayed, and that is briar, English briar, I think it's called, or sweet briar, sorry, sweet briar. And also we've had representations to the council on things like nightshade. Now, I understood that that's now being considered as a priority weed. I can't refer to the first bit, and I know that nodding thistles is a lesser priority, but again, and I know we have the catch-all at the bottom, other priority weeds found during the program. I always believe, though, if it's listed and someone points at us as, why are you spraying that? We can say, because it's listed. It's easier than using a catch-all. They're just some maybe suggestions, because briars are becoming more of a problem on the road. In second part B, herbicides schedule, because I don't think we can absolutely say, and I know that we put the comment there that basically the active ingredients what counts, not the brand. But why do we need to put the brand at all if we include the active ingredient? Because we don't really want to tie ourselves to any particular brand. For instance, Task Force flupropionate. You can get a product called Tosser. There's some others. You know, we may have an issue with Kenzo, so we don't start buying, we may not end up buying all the Kenzo products, Kenmet, Kenup, Kenzon. And Lontrel, I know, in the last season has been very hard to get. So there's a similar product, but its active constituents, it has clopyralliate or whatever it's called, but it also has something else. I'm just wondering if we should stick to the actives and make sure that we've covered ourselves completely with all the active ingredients. By putting the actual brand names there, I know we've put the catch-all at the bottom that it's the active ingredient that's the thing. I'm not quite sure why we're putting the brand names. Is that so the general public or the councils can recognise the product? I'm not sure.
Mr. GM, can you answer that one?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I think
I've got a few more questions, but I'll allow that to be asked
there
first.
is more something that's been happening for some time. That's the language that the plans were originally put together in. From my perspective, the active ingredient is the critical thing, because this is about pesticide notification, and it's the active ingredient that is really relevant. So I don't have any problem in removing brand names, and I agree with the sentiment. I just wonder if this would mean less to other readers, though, the public, if they don't see any brand names. But it's just a passing thought.
Could we reverse it then? Could we put flupropanite bracket EG task force bracket, not so that it we're only using it as an example, not as a, yeah, I think if we put EG or something, it might be better. EG task force and TOSSA, or metasulfurid, EG Kenmat, you know, something. I just think it might be better. Then you can still keep the brand name, but it's only using it as an example.
Mr. Chairman, that would be perfectly appropriate.
Councillor.
The next area.
Yep, continue.
Sorry, the next one is under control methodology. Under I, it says boom spraying techniques will not be used with roadside areas. There are some areas, there are some roadside reserve areas that may warrant a boom spray if there was a bad infestation. Do we really want to say this?
Mr. Chairman, I suppose part of this is trying to balance the techniques that we are definitely going to use and the view of, I'll say, the public towards boom spraying. I mean, boom spraying works fine in your fields and paddocks and orchards and all sorts of stuff because of what you're targeting. But I'm very nervous about saying, and trying to get local councils to agree, that we would go and do boom spraying on roadside areas. One option would be to say, you know, other than in extenuating circumstances, we won't do it. I'd be very nervous about actually doing it, and I suspect our operators would be too, but I do take the point.
No, I'm happy if that's the, I'm just raising it to say, I understand why we've said it, and if you're going to explain it, and I'm happy with the answer and keeping it that way, as long as we don't have a situation where we have weeds out of control on, say, a reserve. It could be on the side of a road where people, you know, it's a parking area, for instance, or something, truck parking area or something like that. And it's so widespread, we might want to put, say, a quad bike over it with a small boom spray. I don't want us all scratching our head and turning around, so we actually can't because we've said we're not going to use that. I'll ask, I suppose the Chief Weed Biosecurity Officer might have a view on this through the General, through the Chairman and through the General Manager.
Chief Biosecurity Officer, have you got thoughts?
Yeah, for you, Mr. Chair. I suppose traditionally we've always done hand spray rather than boom to try and be selective as we could in a given area. I can't think of any main application, like main areas where we'd require the use of a boom for an extended period.
Okay, I'm happy with that.
Happy with that?
Can we then go to K? It says no mechanical slashing of vegetation, and I would think this is normally the case. However, I'll use an example. We have lots of our areas large blackberry bushes that basically, if it was on rural land, the landholder, if they had these sites, would spray, then they would burn, then they would come back a year or so later and clean anything else up. Because we've usually got fences through the middle of these, and half the blackberries in the forestry area controlled, we can't do that. And I've noticed, for instance, on Burriga Road, and it's quite normal that, yes, we spray effectively, but it all starts to come back. Now it's very hard to get into the centre of those bushes to be able to spray the residual that's coming back. And I do know situations where people have had to use sort of whippersnippers to actually cut the thing so they can get in to spray all that sort of stuff and to spray under the canes to be able to kill that. Do we want to preclude ourselves from doing that completely? Because when we can't burn these huge bushes and you've got residual coming back, one of the alternatives may be, and I'm not suggesting, is you've got to get in there with a whippersnipper with basically a saw blade on it, cut the canes so you can actually get into spray, because otherwise you're losing so much spray because the old canes are just taking it and you actually don't hit the underlying regrowth underneath.
Chief Biosecurity Officer, would you like to make a comment? Or would you like to maybe consider this and talk to your staff and come back to the councillors with commentary?
Yeah, I think if we can consider that and come back to it.
Yeah, I'm happy with that.
Mr. Chairman, can I also add a point? Mr.
Yes.
Chairman, just remember that at the moment that list of methods is actually based on, I suppose, what I'll say but what we are expecting that the county council would use as techniques for controlling weeds. And for example, I wouldn't imagine, in the same way as I was talking about the boom spraying, which by implication means that you're going to drive a vehicle through the roadside, the same as mechanical slashing, by implication, it's going to be on a tractor or something. And the same as even if we had burning of weeds. I'm not sure that without giving it further thought, that I'm comfortable with the idea of the county council saying we will do those things on a local council's road, because it has a whole range of extra risks and issues to do with it, including, slashing is a bit like boom spraying. You get everything. So I think we need to give it some serious thought before we decided that that was an appropriate technique for us. If a local council wants to slash their roadsides, then that's a whole different ballgame as far as I'm concerned.
Well, if I could go back to that point, I said maybe, yep, sorry.
I think, and I understand the general manager's point on and I agree with the slasher, it is maybe not, but I'm talking more about, and I've used it myself, is a whippersnipper with a saw blade on it, which doesn't throw it that far, but allows you to get into the bushes. Because I realise burning's out of the question. I realise in most instances a tractor and slashers out, and in fact they do spread it.
Well, if we
but
could,
sometimes you've got no option but to be able to get into the centre of these things. Yeah.
Well, if we can ask the Chief Biosecurity Officer with the General Manager to have a discussion and come back to the councillors in the very near future. If you're happy with that, Councillor McKibben, I think that's the best way to move forward.
Yes, I'm happy with that. And I'm happy. I've looked at the wording of L, and I think that's appropriate, where it says it can be used, but only in exceptional circumstances. That's cut and paint. Now, page 49, which is the road schedule, I couldn't understand why some of them were yellowed, highlighted. But maybe there's a key somewhere.
Mr. Chairman, I alluded to that before. There's a few in there with a yellow marking, and they are not ones that had been included as a result of our inspection program. And I'm talking there about the routine biosecurity officers. They were raised either by other members of staff or members of the council saying, what about this road? We've been and checked them now, and we're saying, yes, they should be in there. And you can see one or two of them haven't actually been risk rated yet, but they're late inclusions.
So I haven't gone through this probably as forensically as I should have, but I did notice that Burriga Road, for instance, is low in the Oberon area. However, and it has been sprayed extensively. However, this, as discussed, I think the general manager some time ago, there is quite a lot of regrowth coming back in those bushes that we have sprayed. So by leaving it low, I'm just worried that, you know, it'll have a low priority and we won't get to it soon enough till the regrowth becomes as it was 2 years ago. Anyway, that's a comment. The other thing I think is probably the tables need a legend. I understood what they mean, but someone else might not. You know, SF, State Forest, BX Bathurst, OB Oberon. And also I wondered why Kalula Road in both Bathurst and Blaine, which extends through Bathurst and Blaney, was probably not there, and Hen and Chicken Lane, which I think is in Bathurst.
Yes, it is. I look from the Bathurst, if Councillor Fry wants to make a comment, I actually forward this on to our Engineering and Parks and Gardens Department for commentary, and they were happy if it hadn't raised any other roads with me, but based on the ones that we have on our list and that, there was no other roads raised to me. I don't know if Councillor Fry. I thought Hen Chicken was worked through. Yes, Chief Biosecurity Officer.
Pretty much, yeah. There is a couple of roads that have been added to this list since it went out to the councillors as well.
Yeah, I thought Hen and Chicken Lane had some weeds on it, in particular the Perthville end. Yeah. And I thought Kalula Road had some on it, but they may have been overtaken by Biddy Bush. I'm not sure.
I don't know if all the other councillors heard, but Councillor Fry made the comment he felt that Hen and Chicken Lane was in reasonable state at the moment. I'm not sure if the Chief Biosecurity Officer wanted to make a comment.
No, you're right, sorry, Mr. Chair. I was just saying there has been a couple of more roads the boys have asked to be listed on since this got sent out to the councillors.
Well, if you could pass that on to us for a comment as soon as you can, that'd be much appreciated. And Councillor Reynolds, sorry, has your hand been up or? Yep. And I do apologise, I missed.
No, that's fine. And I did ask most of my questions. I just had a couple of extras. One was to back up Councillor McKibben, particularly with sticky nightshade. There's only a little bit of it across our area. If one of our contractors sees it, what I suggest, rather than controlling, because you need different chemicals, but to actually report it back, and we actually send one of our weeds officers out. We have it as a priority named there for them to look for, but not to actually take action on, would be my suggestion, because we just don't want it escaping. It's only in a few pockets over very near me, just behind where I live, and a few around Bathurst, I think it's the Bathurst area. And so it's something we want to jump onto and try and control rather than let loose. So I'd like to see it mentioned in there, but a note reported back through to the County Council from our operators if it's cited. And again, if our staff are seeing it, then put it onto a register to try and actually get on top of it quickly, rather than, or if we've got reports coming in that it's on the roadside, to again get on top of it quickly before it seeds and spreads. I just have a question about K. which was the roadside slashing. And in our case, in our council's case, we do a lot of roadside slashing. I know it's only what the county council's doing here, but should we be actually talking with our councils about how to minimise weed spread, and particularly St John's wort, which is one that we do catch up a lot on roadside slashing.
And African lovegrass.
That how we actually progress, and I probably don't need an answer today. It's something that whether we put it on the workshop agenda on how we actually manage roadside slashing and work with our councils so we're not spreading the weeds a lot further. And my other question was with relation to the roadside spraying. And it looks in my council area, so in Blaney Council, that we're starting to get on top. Another good year, hopefully we will start to get on top. What do we do then? Are we looking at putting a reserve in funds, because councils are paying for direct funding of roadside spraying? So if we start to get on top, what's the goal or aim? And that's to the general manager through the chair.
Mr. General Manager.
Mr. Chairman, because of the arrangement that we now have in place, and I'm talking about memorandum of understanding down, including funding, if we get to a stage such as in Blaney, in a year or two where we think everything's pretty much under control, or at least anything that's left isn't worth putting the resources into at that point in time, then we have a very simple mechanism of putting it into an internal reserve until such time it's required. So very easy to do if we get to that point. It wouldn't be spent on other things is probably the most important thing.
Are you happy with that, Councillor Reynolds?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
And Councillor Reynolds, can I ask you the question? Do you talk to your council about that? What the question you asked us about having that relationship as our the rep for Blaney for Upper Macquarie County Council? Have you had those discussions with your GM or engineer?
Sorry, what do you mean? As in a council staff member, as a rep?
Yeah. Have you spoken maybe to your general manager about that question that you've posed to us about, you know, maybe a process moving forward, working with Upper Macquarie on exactly the question you asked of us just then?
You're talking about slashing, or you're talking about?
Yes, yeah, the process of working with Upper Macquarie County Council with councils, because you suggest about talking about a working party, and I just wondered, have you had discussions with your own council about it?
Sorry, I meant the workshop in October.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Yeah, I understand now. I just wonder, had you taken this point to your general manager about it?
No, I haven't, Mr. Chair.
No, fair enough. Thank you.
Councillor Capel would like to talk.
Yep, Councillor Capel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I support the what Councillor Reynolds said about sticky nightshade. I also noticed the LLS has mentioned recently a couple of times about the threat of cooler grass coming into the area. I can say from experience that cooler grass is a terrible thing, and if it gets into the area, it spreads very quickly. So I think you know, things like that that are just starting to show up here are really the ones that we have to nail hard right from the outset, rather than wait until they get established and then try and control them.
Good comment. Thank you. Mr. GM.
Mr. Chairman, I think that's a very good point made by a number of members there in terms of, I think I should add another little section into the plan where in the same place or close to where it talks about the weeds we're treating, and that is identify those new invasive weeds or other priorities that we want to identify and report back, just so people know in the plan that that's what we want to do. And I agree, it is more appropriate for them to be then actually dealt with by the biosecurity officers. So I'll add a little section in there to deal with that.
Thank you. Councillors, any other questions?
Councillor McGibbon has his hand up.
Yep.
Councillor McGibbon.
Or is it just stuck
thank
up
you.
there? Yep.
No, sorry, it was another. Look, I fully endorse what Councillor Reynolds and Councillor Capel have said, but I absolutely agree that we need to look at these things but I think it helps for the program if those things we know are a real threat are actually also listed there. So sticky nightshade and sorry, Councillor Capel, I can't remember the name, but that is a real threat. I know, I've heard of it as well. So I think it's good to list them there so that people actually reading this know that we're looking at those and identifying, and whatever other weeds that you or whoever identifies as, or the council identifies as being, threats to the biosecurity of this region. So I think the other thing I just like to do is refer back to a presentation given by Hugh Webb some time ago, which goes back to what Councillor Reynolds was saying, where he said council slashing of the roads has started to spread at things like African lovegrass and Chilean needlegrass. So we need to be aware of that. And I agree it should be on the workshop timetable. And then we should, out of that workshop, try to address it with our constituent councils as to how best to prevent the spread by slashing.
Thank you. Councillors, any other commentary?
The General Manager, I think.
Mr. GM, did you want to say something?
Mr. Chairman, just further to the point by Member McKibben, one of the reasons that we're also sort of formalising this whole program in a slightly different way is that we want, like I think you did at Bathurst, we actually want the local city engineer or shire engineer to look at the list and see the roads and know that that's what we'll be working on. So, be aware if you're doing things out there, which is planned slashing and grading and stuff, don't go and mow it, slash it or grade it the day after we've been out there spraying and destroy everything that was done, which does happen from time to time. So I agree, it is a really important issue to get that communication going. And the memorandum of understanding specifically provided for each council to identify their contact person to help facilitate that. I can't say it's working very well yet, but it requires effort by us as well.
That's right, Mr. Chairman, and that's exactly what point H is about as well, where you don't start clearing weeds on a place that has an erosion problem. So if it's on your list, then the council can also inform the local constituent councils, can also inform the county council of the various problems on the various roads. Work with them. That's right. Well done.
Thank you. If councillors know, I'll just make a comment that last weekend I was invited out by a local councillor to have a look at his property and commentary to do with Upper Macquarie County Council, what he's done with weeds on his property. What you just said there, Councillor Leslie, with erosion was very interesting, and actually I've going to hopefully organise in the future, but potentially if councillors are interested, I think maybe we should be looking at possibly workshopping, looking at properties and what they've done, and having hopefully open a more dialogue, because it was very good to hear where he didn't think much of us in the past. He made it very clear to me that he can see a very changed Upper Macquarie County Council, how we do dealing with weeds and dealing with farmers. So I've got more discussions with him about potentially, he said he would be interested for us to come out if we were interested to have a look. So if there's no other further comments, councillors, we've got a recommendation there. All for? Against? Carried. Thank you. Councillors, item 7, weed biosecurity operations update. Can I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Fry, you move. Seconder?
Councillor McKibben?
Is he? I didn't see his hand. Okay, Councillor McKibben. It's just popped up. Yep, any commentary, councillors? Councillor McKibben?
Sorry?
Did you want to speak?
No, I think it's a very comprehensive report. It speaks for itself.
Councillor Reynolds?
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick question on the penalty notices, which continue to increase in number up to 17 now. A quick clarification through you, Mr. Chair, to the General Manager. Is that 17 cases including a couple of ones that had to be withdrawn, or are they ones that are actually that the County Council's progressing with?
Mr. Chairman, that's 7. So that's recording the fact that 17 notices in total were issued. As you're aware, there's a review process if people do it the right way. There's been, I think, I've got 1 review I'm doing at the moment, and I think there's been 4 withdrawn. 1 which was replaced with a $1,000 bond, which is at our discretion to do the work if they don't comply by the due date. So that's like under an undertaking. And the other ones I've previously mentioned, but they were basically where circumstances that we weren't aware of when we issued the penalty notice effectively allowed the people to get off, but that only means they got away with the penalty. They don't get away with not doing the work, and if they fail on the extended direction, they'll get another penalty, but we haven't actually had to do that yet.
A second question through you, Mr. Chair, to the General Manager. There were a couple of landholders that were incorrectly identified in my local government area, from what I understand.
Yeah.
How have we, given we identified the wrong landholder, how have we progressed without identifying the landholders, but how have we progressed with those landholders that we were going to serve a penalty infringement notice on?
Mr. Chairman, yeah, I think there's 2 or 3 properties in total, but basically we believe that a particular person was the owner, and we went through our process, and at the point of penalties we discovered that they actually had sold the property some 12 or 18 months before. So what we need to do in a case like that is give the real landowner the appropriate treatment from the start. So we effectively have to start again, because it's unfair to go straight to a direction, have it done in 3 weeks or something when they actually knew nothing about it. So what we do though is make sure we don't give any excess time. They'll be on a control notice, and I'm not sure of the timing, but they'll then move to the direction and penalty if they don't do anything.
And a third question through you, Mr. Chair, to the General Manager. Of the approximate 12 that have been served penalty infringement notices that haven't appealed or done, how many have actually paid a fine and how many are still outstanding?
I'm not sure if the Biosecurity Administration Officer has a better up-to-date knowledge than me. We get reports regularly from Revenue New South Wales, and they're the most obscure things you've ever seen. They acknowledge that 17 were issued, and we know that we've been paid for a few of them, but I'd have to say at this moment, I don't fully understand how many have actually been paid, but it is more than none.
And one final question through you, Mr. Chair. Those that have paid, and so they've admitted, you know, as in they've paid the penalty notice, how are we then proceeding after they've paid? Are we going to a further inspection, or what's the process once they've acknowledged they've got a problem?
So what happens is Mr. Chairman, we issue the penalty notice, and there's a statutory review window of between 42 and 56 days, depending on circumstances. So we do nothing until that time is up in case there's a valid appeal and whatever. So at that point, we then extend the direction notice for another minimum period of time necessary, taking into account climate, seasons and weather and all the rest of it. And if they fail to comply with it by that date, they would actually then get another penalty notice. And the second time, which we haven't done it yet, but I think my current inclination is to then say the penalty is for not meeting your biosecurity obligations, as distinct from not complying with a direction, in which case it would then be a $2,000 fine. We haven't quite got to that stage yet, but we're not far away from finding out.
Councillor Leslie has his hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's the chemical sales to landholders. You've got 2 figures there. Well, one figure, 162,000. Is that net or gross? And if it's only one, how much profit is there, if any? On page 16, I think of 16 of 20. Or 17 of 20.
Top of 17.
Yeah.
Sorry. So that is actually the gross, correct me if I'm wrong, Lisa, is it the 162 and the 142, is that gross income? After our expenses, or is it before?
That is our expense.
Oh, right. Okay. Sorry. Right. So
that's what it cost us to sell.
So that's the cost to us, and we generally make about a 10% margin. It's varies slightly depending on which program it's being paid from, and in relation to the council roadsides, we have no margin. For aerial and over the counter, we do. So I can tell you specifically at some point, but I need to look at the ledgers.
No, thank you. 10%, fine. Approximately.
Yeah.
Any other questions, councillors? If not, there is a recommendation at the bottom of that page. Can I have all move it? All for? Against? Carried. Councillors, we're going to go into confidential as a whole. Can I have a mover and a seconder to go into a confidential report?
I'll move that.
Councillor Leslie.
Councillor McKibben.
Councillor McKibben, thank you. All for? Against? Carried. Our general, I'll welcome the general, is it on?
Yes, it's on now.
Okay, I'll ask the General Manager to please read the recommendations from the confidential committee, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In relation to item 8, the recommendation of the committee is that the Weed Biosecurity Risk Register report is noted. In relation to item 9, the confidential legal matter, the recommendation from the committee is that in light of the lack of records to substantiate the council's position, that it properly fulfilled its contractual commitments and the disproportionate cost of defending a claim for damages. Council accepts the landholder's offer and write off the balance as a bad debt in accordance with Council's debt management policy.
Thank you. And can I have a student administration officer to read the confidential chairman's report, please?
Sure. I see Councillor McKibben there is got his hand up. Should I wait?
So I don't know what's happened to mine here, sorry.
I thought we had slightly amended that to seek a confidentiality undertaking if it can be achieved.
David Young, did you hear that?
Mr. Chairman, that is correct, and I've made a note to do that. I hadn't actually put it into the recommendation at that stage.
Okay, leave it out of the recommendation.
Yep, and we'll do that on the side. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, yes?
Yes.
In relation to the confidential chairman's report of the General Manager's performance, the recommendation was that Council notes the findings of the Performance Review Committee with regards to the General Manager's recent annual performance review. That Council approves the proposed performance plan for the General Manager in contract year 3 as presented, noting that the performance plan can be updated or otherwise amended by agreement from time to time. That Council, number 3, that Council considers the General Manager's contract renewal position and respond in due course.
Thank you. All for and against, and I'll just jump in here, Councillor Kingham. This is where you state if you want your negative vote, just so you understand, so it can be recorded. Is he still there?
Yes, he is.
Okay, all for, against, and Kingham, Councillor Kingham, Member Kingham, you want, yes? Okay, thank you. Declare the motion carried. Declare the meeting closed at 5:22. Recording stop, Lisa.
And yeah.
Thank you. Councillors,
Still going.